You've watched the trailer, you've fallen in love with the 1940s aesthetic, and you've even Googled One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest because, let's be honest, you've never watched it. If you're anything like me, your Twitter feed has been buzzing about Ryan Murphy's newest series, Ratched, an origin story about a corrupt and sadistic nurse played by unofficial lesbian goddess Sarah Paulson. It's a thrilling crime drama with a captivating mystery at its core. Plus, lesbians. It's a no-brainer. You have to watch it. Except, well, should you? Despite being well-reviewed, the show has firmly divided your Twitter feed into 3 camps. Loved it, hated it, and eh. So if you're one of the many who are still on the fence about Ratched, here are 5 reasons why this might not be the show for you. And as always, there will be some very mild spoilers, so proceed with caution. Do not pass go, do not collect $500, and most importantly, do not press play. If you hate American Horror Story, you'll definitely want to skip Ratched, which is basically a more restrained, better lit version of Ryan Murphy's creepy anthology series. In fact, by episode 3, I was waiting for Evan Peters and Lily Rabe to show up. And just like American Horror Story, Ratched is full of unsympathetic characters and ridiculously intricate and unnecessary plot lines. And while Ratched doesn't have half the amount of gore as a typical season of AHS, the gore it does include will leave you squirming. Having a likable protagonist to root for isn't a necessity, but it is kind of nice. And Mildred Ratched is nothing of the sort. She's a twisted, conniving queen of the gaslight, and she does things that are unforgivable in the name of satisfying her own selfish mission. The problem is, she's the main character, and the show requires that you root for her because, well, there's no one else to root for. And if you're the kind of person who can't see themselves spending 8 hours cheering on a sadistic pathological liar, you might want to keep scrolling. So, you heard there were lesbians. And not just any lesbians, but middle-aged lesbians wooing each other while wearing 1940s garb. And I'll be honest with you, Cynthia Nixon feeding Sarah Paulson oysters while jazz plays softly in the background and the Pacific Ocean sways behind them is a mood. But is it enough of a mood to justify watching Ratched? Probably not. Despite the Carol vibes that Mildred and Gwendolyn's love story gives off, there are still some glaring flaws. The biggest being our complete distrust of Nurse Ratched. Can such a malicious character even fall in love anyway? Who knows? But if the lesbian subplot is the only reason Ratched is on your radar, you might want to turn it off. You are the first in line to watch Joker. You've watched Maleficent more times than you can count, and you know every song to Wicked by heart. You, my friend, are a collector of villain origin stories. And who deserves an origin story more than the 5th greatest villain in film history? But while the original Nurse Ratched was a sadistic and cold-hearted tyrant, she wasn't a psychopathic killer. So how can Netflix's Ratched be considered a true origin story? Acolytes of Horror has an awesome and in-depth video about how and why Ratched fails as an origin story, and if you have the time, it's definitely worth the watch. But essentially, there's no way this new version of Nurse Ratched could have believably evolved into her final form in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So if you're an origin story junkie, you might want to cross this one off your list. In an effort to keep spoilers to a minimum, I won't delve into Nurse Ratched's backstory, but it is effectively used to justify all of the terrible things she does. And past trauma can definitely play a role in a person's actions and mental state. And Ratched even teases the idea that Mildred is mentally ill. But for the most part, she makes sound decisions and even remarks that she is aware of the difference between right and wrong. But to loosely quote Gwendolyn, "It sucks that the world was not kind to you, but that's not a justification for, killing people." But despite Gwendolyn's words of wisdom, that seems to be exactly what the show wants the audience to do: absolve Nurse Ratched of her sins because of her dark past. But if the idea of doing a 180 and letting a character completely off the hook for unspeakable crimes seems a little...
See, now that's some bullshit.
Well, I think you know what I'm gonna say. So if you were still on the fence, hopefully this video will help to clarify things. And for those of you who have already watched Ratched, what did you think? Let me know in the comments. And one more thing before I go, I want to give a shout out to my first 2 patrons ever. Nicole and Rose, you guys are awesome, and I'm so touched by the support. Thank you so much. And if anyone else wants to show your girl some love, my Patreon link is in the description. It honestly means the world to me that you guys are enjoying my content, so thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe for more videos just like this one, and I'll see you next week.